Hello and welcome to this afternoon's webinar on Kickstart. My name's Stephen Evans. I'm the Chief Executive of the Learning and Work Institute. It was great to see so many of you very keen for us to get started. Very sorry we're a few minutes late running, but we should be up and running now, so welcome everybody. And it's great to see so much interest in Kickstart as well. A couple of things by way of introduction, probably from me first, before we move on to our speakers. And I should say as well that if you're on Twitter, please do tweet away using the hashtag LW Kickstart. Please do put up lots of questions and comments. I can see lots about starting the webinar, but ask some questions and comments about Kickstart, and we'll try and pick those up as we go through. And there will be a poll opening up shortly as well. I think let's set Kickstart in a bit of context. Since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, the number of young people claiming unemployment-related benefits has gone up by more than 120%, so a really sharp spike. And we know that young people are also more likely to be furloughed than other age groups. A real risk perhaps as the furlough scheme comes to an end at the end of October of a further wave of unemployment for young people too. And then also young people leaving full-time education and facing a double whammy of disrupted education and then a pretty tough labour market. So some really stark effects of the pandemic so far on young people in particular, other age groups, but our focus today is on young people and the risk of further impacts to come. And we know that many of the sectors that are constrained at the moment or affected by restrictions, which in some parts of the country are tightening again, are ones that are large employers and often large employers of young people and give a real first step on the career ladder. So young people often hit hardest in recessions, and certainly that's so far in this one. And it's not clear that the jobs market is going to bounce back as quickly as we might hope, given the ongoing restrictions associated with the pandemic. And that's where Kickstart, I think, comes into it as part of a response, as part of the government's plan for jobs announced in the summer. We were really pleased to see Kickstart announced. We know that things like the Future Jobs Fund, which supported or paid for job placements for young people, worked in the last recession. So the idea about covering wage costs and creating those 6-month placements, supporting those jobs for 6 months, we know that's a good idea. We know that it works. So it's great to see it going. It's great to see employers able to pledge their places now, and I think the first referrals will begin from next month. And it's great to see so much interest and so much focus on this as a policy. So that's why we published our report last week, and that's why we've got this webinar today to say, well, given we've got Kickstart, how do we make sure it works? How do we make sure that young people benefit and it delivers results? And I guess for me, there's probably 3 areas that I'm particularly focused on. The first is, how does Kickstart fit into a wider offer for young people? We argued for a youth guarantee, making sure young people get a job, training or apprenticeship offer. How do we make sure that we don't just have an isolated programme over here and it's not linked into apprenticeships or traineeships or lots of other things? So how do we make sure it's an offer that is part of that wider approach? Second of all, how do we make sure that we get quality of offer and quality of support in there as well? So that includes supporting employers to make sure placements work for them, but also work for young people and give them some good experience. It includes wraparound support, coaching, careers advice, job search as the placement goes on. How do we make sure we build all that in and make sure it's of really high quality? Because there's no point having loads of placements if they don't offer that support as well. And then thirdly, how do we make sure that we deliver outcomes at the end of this? The purpose of those Kickstart jobs is to make sure young people get jobs at the end, whether that's with the same employer or a different employer. So how do we make sure that they go on and do that? In the spirit of joining things up with the Department for Education, how do we make sure that we get as many young people as possible moving on to apprenticeships at the end and continuing their education as well as their employment? So I think Kickstart's really welcome. It's great that so many people are really interested and want to make a success of it. The question is, how do we make sure that happens? What do we need to do in terms of policy management and delivery? So that's what we'll be focusing on today. Now, you should all have access to the poll in Slido, which we're going to open up now and give you a chance to vote on. That is asking really about what are the most important things, and you can choose two. I'd probably like to choose all of these and then several others, but we have to sort of narrow it down somehow. What are the key things to make Kickstart a success? So is it that point about making it part of a wider youth guarantee or wider set of offers? Is it about making sure that we target those who will benefit most, whether they're claiming benefits or not? Is it about focusing on just get the numbers, get the quantity? And is it the quality of the placement, or is it that sustainability at the end? So please do still get voting away. You can pick any of those two options, and we'll pick up the results and discuss a bit about that later on. So please do get voting away, as well as tweeting away and all the other things that we try and juggle whilst we're doing online events these days. So without further ado, I'm going to move across to our first speaker, and we've been really pleased to work with the DWP since the start of the pandemic to try and help inform and support with some of the policy responses. So it's great to have Oliver Stanley here from the Kickstart policy team in the Department for Work and Pensions. So Oliver, I'm going to pass across to you to talk a little bit about the Kickstart programme and what you and DWP think we need to do in order to make it a success. And I think you need to unmute if you're struggling to find the button.
Yeah, I was talking away to myself. I was just thanking you for such a good summary of the kind of position the economy is in and why Kickstart has had to be introduced. You've saved me a couple of slides there. I will just share my screen. There we go. So, how do we get involved in Kickstart? Can I hide? Okay, so what is the Kickstart scheme? Stephen's summed up very well there, but essentially it is a fund that is to help young people at risk of long-term unemployment get into the job market by providing government funding for employers to create 6-month positions. Employers of all sizes and sectors are being encouraged, and further funding is available so employers can support young people to develop their skills and help them move into a sustained employment. So it is, most importantly, it is a reaction to the COVID pandemic. So it is a short-term scheme. It is running, the last placements will start around November, December time 2021 and running into 6 months after that, so around summer 22. We cover 25 hours a week at relevant national minimum wage, because it's obviously national minimum wage changes with the age of the person, associated national insurance and automatic enrolment pension contribution. That's always a mouthful. And as well as a £1,500 job training and support for work search preparation. So how do employers get involved? How do employers take on a Kickstart young person? Employers need to have a role specially created and additional to their existing organization. Kickstart jobs have to be completely new. They can't exist without this funding. We don't want to encourage less respectable employers to fire people than hire young people at the public expense. We don't expect many people to do that, obviously, but we have to be careful. So you apply for your funding. The employer's jobs are advertised through our DWP network and Job Centre Plus, and we'll match them with young people, the first cohort being on universal credit. So kind of a controversial thing, and I'm sure it will come up later, is this 30 job limit. So to apply for funding, you need to have 30 positions open for young people. An employer can provide this all themselves. That's what this slide is about. And I'll share these slides later so you can read it without me rattling through at breakneck pace. But so either you apply yourselves with 30 jobs, or you can apply through a gateway. Gateway organizations act to kind of gather together the smaller bids, maybe a corner shop with 1 or 2 people, just any small to medium employers that can't put 30 together on their own, to create a network of smaller businesses to access the scheme, access their funding. Gateways also receive an extra £300 funding per young person to help with the admin costs. And we've published a list of over 500 approved organizations that are willing to act as gateways for smaller employers. These aren't just local authorities, but larger employers, trade bodies, charities, education providers, and just general organizations. And how can you become a Kickstart gateway? So it's covered up on my screen by this little chat window, but there's an email in the slides. You can send an expression of interest form to get on the list, or just collect the bids and make an application on their behalf. And how can you help us deliver Kickstart? So if you don't want to necessarily apply for roles, though we encourage it, obviously, you can always go to your networks if you're a charity or an organization and say, look, the government is offering to pay for you to employ someone for 6 months. This is great for you. This is great for the young person. Are you capable of doing it? Can we help you at all? I think one of the best examples that I pull out regularly in these kind of talks, and I've heard other people talk about charity organizations. So maybe Shelter, for example, will help young people with housing, and other people, but specifically in this case, young people. And maybe they've been going to a lot of people all the time saying, please can you hire a young person who is in our books and needs support? But now they can do it and say, the government will pay you to hire this young person. And then you can have these when I share them later, but just a list of more local kind of contacts you can speak to about Kickstart if you have more bespoke questions. There you go. So I always bring out these slides, but I think the best way to kind of to advertise Kickstart is just to have the discussion and the Q&A. So I'll happily pass over and answer any questions later on.
Great, thanks, Oliver. There's an absolute ton of questions coming through. I think we'll try and go through as many of these as we can, but I think what I might also suggest is if the Learning and Work Institute team can try and gather them together or save them, because there's some quite specific ones here about how it works or the process. And then Oliver, perhaps if you or the team can maybe sort of give us the answers to those offline as well, and we can make sure that everyone who's logged in has got them as well, because there's too many to get through, I think. But
that sounds very sensible. Yeah, I can do that for you.
Thank you. So we'll try and get through as many as we can, but also we're definitely not going to get through all of these. So we'll try and make sure that we gather together answers where there's some quite specific questions about the process. There is one about the timing here, which I will just pick up, Oliver, just before I move on to our next speaker, which is about people who've applied to be a gateway organisation. If they have applied, should they have already heard about whether they've been accepted or not, or are you kind of still working through some of those applications?
So there are quite a few people who have applied. I think the rough kind of timeline is about a month. There's obviously some due diligence checks, and they can take as long as they can take, but we're trying to get that time down and respond to everyone. I think I don't know if I should say, but in the next couple of days we're expecting to send out the kind of why aren't you on the list, or kind of letters and stuff going out. So you should hear soon, basically.
Okay, thank you. And just one more question as well, which sort of Vanda has pointed out on the Q&A. that maybe some of these questions that I've got on my list here, I'm trying to multitask, I'm not very good at this, because the sort of full set of guidance on a number of issues is not out yet. So do you know when there's going to be a sort of fuller set of guidance in general, because that kind of might deal with some of these questions as well?
I couldn't give a date, but there's definitely stuff in development.
Okay, all right. Well, we might come back to that, and then we'll try and get through some specific questions as well. And as I say, we will pick up the sort of list of specific questions if we don't get to all of them, and try and make sure that we email out answers afterwards. So thank you for that that offer. I'm going to move on to our next speakers, and then we will try and pick up as many of these questions and debates and conversations as we go through as well. And please do keep voting away on the poll as we go. So first up, we have Sam Windett, who is the Director of Policy at Impetus, and Sam's done an amazing amount of work on youth employment in general, and around this issue in particular as well. So Sam, I'll pass across to you to give your sort of thoughts and views and ideas on this.
Thanks very much, Stephen. It's always great to start speaking when there's a ton of questions that have been flooding in, and I very much hope I expect they're mostly for the DWP. I've just got 5 minutes, so I'll give you, I won't go over Stephen's background. Kickstart is what we're focusing on. Kickstart is one answer to the youth employment challenge facing the UK. It's a huge challenge that we're all facing. We've seen the largest falls in employment amongst the younger age groups, 156,000 in the last quarter drop in employment for young people, whereas other age groups stayed more relatively steady. So we're going to focus on Kickstart, and I've been asked to talk about what will make it a success. You've heard about some of the details from Oliver. I think we need that guidance, which we've been promised as well, which should answer some of the questions I'm sure you will have. I'm actually going to start on the negative. I'm going to start on what will make it a failure. And as Youth Employment Group chairs, we have been discussing this with the Minister for Employment, with Baroness Steadman-Scott, with officials across the department, from policy to design to evaluation of Kickstart. If anyone's interested in the Youth Employment Group, please do check us out and join up. What will make it fail? So there's the key details, I think, on this is not the right people, not the right young people going through to Kickstart. If young people who would have got a job anyway end up on Kickstart, this scheme will not be value for money. This scheme has to be for young people who need this extra bit of support. There will be many of them. I know that there's been discussions even now about extending Kickstart to other age ranges, to other groups. We need this to work for young people primarily. It is the answer to a problem. We can then discuss, whether other groups would benefit from something like Kickstart. In amongst getting the right young people onto the scheme come questions around eligibility. So will disabled young people be able to use access to work? Will it work in conjunction easily to ensure that different groups of young people will be able to get onto Kickstart? Will work coaches have the right eligibility criteria? Will all work coaches adhere to the same, or will it be different in different places? Another area will be that there aren't quality jobs and quality placements through the scheme. This is really important. If there's rubbish jobs, basically, that young people don't see any interest in, and they're not getting the right support alongside it, then there are big reputational issues for Kickstart. I can easily see a headline at Christmas, young person pushed into placement that they didn't want to do without the support. The employers, not very pleased because their young person isn't doing what they wanted them to do. And you get a reputational issue, which will put employers off, which will put young people off. So we've got to crack this before we start the placements coming through. Another issue will be not getting the right geographical match. So you might get a lot of young people in one place that need a lot of placements, and not match them with the same number and quality of employers. At the moment, I know the department's been quite hands-off about that. As we start seeing them come through, we're seeing a lot of placements coming through and a lot of interest. But there is a question about should the department be a little bit more hands-on on incentivising that, where if we get cold spots where young people need those placements. And then there's questions around mandation and sanctioning. This can't come with a high-level threat of a sanction if the young person doesn't take up the placement. So I think that will put employers off immensely. So we need to get all of those details worked out as well. If we don't get that right, there are not only reputational issues for Kickstart, but also when the National Audit Office in a few years' time comes to do its business and looks at value for money of the scheme, it may well consider, if it's not for the right young people, if it's not working with quality placements and with the right support, that it's not being valued for money. That would be disastrous for similar schemes in future if we don't have these kind of great options for young people who need them. So I'm just going to mention a couple of things that will make it a success. Everybody coming together. So I think there's a lot of interest in these kind of webinars, which is great. Local authorities, housing associations, we're going to hear from John, charities, employers. It's going to take everybody coming together to make this work. Having a large number of gateways, a large number of employers, especially small employers in areas where there isn't as many big employers. That's going to be very important that we get that geographical spread. Using that £1,500 to provide that support for young people that's tailored, that's relevant to them and appropriate, that's going to be critical. And we have to be focused on what's the end game. This isn't about numbers in work placements. This is about moving young people into sustainable jobs after the Kickstart scheme. So if we start chasing numbers and start opening up Kickstart because we're just wanting to, get hundreds of thousands more people into Kickstart, that will be entirely missing the point if they all end up going back to the job centre. So we've got to keep focused on the ultimate prize, which is sustainable employment for these young people, not having them fall back into becoming neat or back to the job centre. And also, I think a success would be it looking different in different places. So other partners coming together, putting different resources into Kickstart. Government is putting some money on the table with Kickstart. Other partners can come and put their own resources into this. So maybe it will be a different Kickstart in Camden than it is in Greater Manchester. I think that would be a success, but we have to evaluate this. We have to have rapid evaluation to make improvements as we go along quickly if groups of young people are not benefiting. But we also have to have a long-term, robust evaluation alongside so that future generations can also benefit from knowing what works. We've got lots more recommendations on this in our Youth Employment Group recommendations paper, so please do take a look. That's it from me, Stephen.
Great, thank you, Sam. Tons to pick up on there. And lots of discussion in the Q&A around some of those issues. And I think certainly the point around making sure that young people who will benefit most get access to this and that it's good quality placements and not chasing numbers, because you'll miss out on both of those, but we kind of need the numbers as well. These are the sort of balances we're trying, and we've got lots of experience, good and very bad, in previous employment and skills programs are trying to do some of this. So there's lots of questions around some of that, which we'll pick up in a moment, I think, but I'm going to bring in our final speaker next, and then we can open up and pick up some of those questions and have that wider discussion. And Sam kind of mentioned the role of housing associations, who play a vital role in lots of employment and skills provision already, and I think will play a leading role in Kickstart. So I'm really pleased that we've got John Westby, who's the head of fundraising and business development at Clarion Futures, who do an amazing amount of work on employment and skills support generally, and I'm sure we'll do on Kickstart as well. So John, we're very happy to have you here, and I wonder if you could perhaps say a little bit about your view of the role of the housing sector in Kickstart, and also perhaps what Clarion Futures in particular is planning as well.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Yeah, from Clarion's perspective, we initially went into this to make sure the housing sector were aware of what was going on. So we set up what we call the Kickstart Housing Network. In actual fact, that's spanned out beyond the housing sector, because we are looking to work with training providers, voluntary organisations, local authorities and the like. So the network now has about 170 members overall. We at one stage then decided to become an intermediary ourselves, and we submitted an expression of interest which went off on time. and we're in the process now of putting an application together. As we currently stand, there are 88 housing providers in that partnership. We're calling it a Kickstart Housing Partnership. It's 88 or 89, in fact, one more came in today. And we're also going to our subcontractors, our construction subcontractors, and organisations we deal with as well in the voluntary sector. So we've got 10 subcontractors involved, and 13 voluntary organisations involved in the partnership. So overall, 112 organisations. Now they can't all get involved at the same time initially because they're not ready for it. It's not a numbers game, as Sam mentioned. It's more to do with the quality. And so I'm discouraging organisations from coming in too soon until they've actually got these placements sorted out and they've decided exactly what they want to do with them and how many. So we've got, in the initial bid, only 60 organisations are in a position now to go forward for the initial bid, with a further 49 coming on board later, any time before the end of the programme, which currently is the end of December 2021. So we have a total of, excluding Clarion, 514 placements. That covers England and Wales. Clarion, we think, will put in about 220 vacancies across the business. So it'll be internal vacancies across 84 different departments. Our experience was sort of fed by Future Jobs Fund some 10 years ago. We took on 111 people and we still had 10 people with us. We were very successful. Over 94% had a positive outcome from the Future Jobs Fund experience we had. So as we stand, it's quite a large partnership. They issued some new guidance on the 9th of October, which was a little bit daunting because it meant my draft bid has to change with the content of that guidance, which is more specific. So we'll end up put the bid in sometime next week for that number of placements. There's other ideas that have come out through the parts of the housing sector which are very interesting. Some organisations, one housing provider wants to take on board people themselves for the voluntary sector, basically, and use it as a sort of community approach. They're calling it a Kickstart in the community. And the idea here is that it's community action, and they want to try and use it for research, the community with young people, and see what can be done and support other organisations. So there's quite a raft of opportunity. The numbers of jobs coming through, a wide range across all the housing sector, business and voluntary sector organisations. So we're putting together all the information at the moment, which will hit the bid. I don't think there's any other major issues. It's been covered by Oliver what the general theme is on this. It's more to do, I think, with the need to focus on the quality of the experience. And I rightly agree with what Sam was saying about getting the right person into post. The issues I suppose we're having as an intermediary is the speed at which the guidance is coming out, and filtering out the rumours from what's actually going to happen on this. But we're managing that okay. We're working very closely with the communities that work on this, and URSA. So we're keeping in touch with what's going on, and of course Sam. So there's a range of people who are keeping in touch with what's happening in government level. So we think overall it'll be quite a positive programme. The intention for the partnership, and in fact the network, is to exchange good practice. So we don't intend to just to run the programme. It's making sure that everyone knows what everyone else is doing, which is good, and seeing if we can benefit all the way through. So that's the main function, and that'll extend the network. That's about it, really. That's how we stand right now.
Great, thank you, John. That's really helpful, and I'm sure gives people lots of ideas and links to make there as well. I think what we'll do now is we'll try and gather together some of the questions and the sort of issues that are coming up and kind of put them to each of you. And I'm going to try and group them together a little bit because there's loads of questions which are great, and then there's some common themes. So I think there's several questions and comments in here about eligibility, and my understanding is that eligibility is 16 to 24-year-olds claiming universal credit at risk, judged by their work coach to be at risk of long-term unemployment. Now, Oliver will correct me if I've gone off piste on that. But I think there's also a question about, well, should the eligibility be a bit wider? So there are lots of young people who are out of work but not claiming benefits. So should local authorities and others have a chance to refer a certain number of people onto the scheme, even if they're not claiming universal credit or other benefits? And then also a couple of points about the nature of the process for young people. So are they going to get to choose a Kickstart placement or express a preference, or is there going to be a sort of application process because they are jobs? And also, are they what's the role of conditionality here? So is it a voluntary programme to take part in, or is it part of a claimant commitment and therefore subject to conditionality? So Oliver, if we can maybe start with you about that sort of, there's three very simple questions to start with there, so sorry about this, but there's a kind of point about, what's the DWP's view about flexibility to refer people in who are not on benefits, for example, in particular in that younger age group. And then secondly, about the process, is it an application process for young people or do they get some choice? And then thirdly, about the sort of nature of conditionality.
Yeah, so the first cohort is 16 to 24 UC work coach judged at risk of long-term unemployment. You're right. The plan is to expand this, and I think this is coming into the quality over quantity kind of initial concerns, is that these are the people we need to help first, and we need to make sure that the scheme is working before we just kind of funnel hundreds and hundreds of thousands of young people into a scheme that then it turns out isn't helping. So we need to make sure this kind of first smaller cohort works, and then we'll look at the wider expanding of the cohort. In terms of, what was the question? Sorry, second question. I should have really made a note.
So, well, I've got to try and remember now as well. There's the point about expanding eligibility, which you talked about, and then there's a point about, are young people going to get to choose their placement, their Kickstart job, or sort of apply for Kickstart jobs, or are they just going to be allocated by a work coach? And then also, is it part of the requirements? Is it going to be part of the requirements of their benefits, and so they risk being sanctioned, or is it a voluntary programme?
Okay, so you can choose to go on to, so a young person on universal credit can choose whether they want to go on to Kickstart. That is a discussion they have with their work coach. No one is being forced into a Kickstart position. I think a very important part of this is it needs to be the right match for that young person and for the employer. A key part of, as all of us know, of the finding a job process is the kind of experience of an interview, just for the employer just as much as it is for the young person. So I think it's going to be around about 5, but it can change based on the position and the size of the bids. But a number of people will find Kickstart eligible young people, will make them a kind of pool of workers, and then employers interview several Kickstart young people to find the best fit for the job. And in terms of conditionality and sanctions, no one's being forced into Kickstart. You will not be, so there will be no kind of punishment for not going on Kickstart. And if someone left the job early, we understand that sometimes a job doesn't work out. So if there's a good reason, then it will be discussed with the work coach. We don't want to punish anyone for, it's everyone's quitting and moving around their jobs at the moment, so we don't want to punish anyone.
Okay, thank you. Well, therein lies a further discussion probably about the definition of good reason, which is, but we shan't get into that right now, but I think that feels like it's quite important given what Sam just described as a potential scenario, as a risk that we all want to avoid. I might move across to John, perhaps, just to sort of pick up on, you talked about how you're putting together, how you hope this is going to work for you. What's your kind of sense about, have you got young people who are residents who you would like to be on this scheme, but they're not claiming benefits, and therefore you'd like some flex on the eligibility? Or how does those sort of issues look from your perspective?
In an ideal world, it'd be good to be able to refer people that we know and have worked with onto the program and then have them refer back to us. But my understanding is that there's a reluctance from DVP to allow that to happen, which is a bit of a shame, really, because these people would definitely benefit, because we know they would from the assessments we made of them. So some flex in that approach would be quite useful to us. Lots of housing providers have jobs and training provision, and they do work closely with their residents. So we're probably better placed than the work coaches in some senses to determine whether a vacancy is suitable. I'd like to see some flexibility on that going down the line. We're led to believe that our local relationships with JCPs are quite key in all this. So any flexibility there might be at a local level rather than from the overall level. But I'd like to see a bit more clarity in that from the approach that DVP is taking.
Okay, thank you. And Sam, I guess sort of thoughts on those issues, and then there's also lots of questions coming through about the sort of quality elements as well. So I do want to move us on to that too, about, you know, for example, the extra budget for training and the links to traineeships and apprenticeships as well. So kind of thoughts on those initial issues, but also moving on to the quality stuff as well.
Oh, there's so much to cover, isn't there? I've had very positive sort of murmurings from DWP about extending, Kickstart, beyond universal credit claimants, but not in this very first stage. And I think there is an issue about the urgency. I mean, we have a youth unemployment problem now. It is an urgent problem, and it's growing. So we do need something in place quickly. And I think the DWP is working at speed on that. But I am pleased to hear that they're thinking about extending it beyond universal credit claimants, because that's exactly where it needs to go. In the youth employment group, we're going to be holding a roundtable, a sort of workshop on what that should look like, because of course there's lots of young people that sit outside job centre. So for us, it's the young people who are probably further away from the jobs market, who need that extra bit of support, rather than graduates fresh out of university who could easily and happily go and get a job. So again, it's who should we target that extra resource at. But those are really good questions to be asking. I think it's just in stages. That's what I think we need to take this in, is in stages. The questions that then Oliver answered about, conditionality, I think we need some real clarity on those in particular, so that employers and young people can feel very assured about what the process definitely is, especially in whether they're going to be expected to do a job search alongside, and if they didn't, alongside their Kickstart placement, if they didn't, whether they'd get a sanction. We understand it's up to work coach discretion, but it'd be great to have a little bit more sort of, know that there wouldn't be sanctioning around that, or high level sanctions. Quality. Yeah, we're looking for that detailed guidance from DWP, but it'd be great alongside that to have just some examples of what the department thinks that they're looking for in terms of a quality placement and in terms of quality support. I think that can go often a long way, and I'm sure everybody on this webinar has seen it, where you just get some ideas of what it could look like, what good could look like, and then people can work to that, and they can change it and flex it. It's not going, it shouldn't be this is what it has to look like, because it should differ for different young people and different employers, but maybe an idea of what good looks like would be helpful.
Thanks, Sam. That's something, when we were doing some work around T-levels, that's something that came up with the employers we spoke to, that they kind of wanted to get involved, wanted to help, but wanted to know what good looked like. So I'd certainly fully endorse that sort of view about some more general guidance or examples on that would be really helpful. Oliver, a few of the questions that have come up and comments are around the sort of training and other support that takes part as part of somebody's Kickstart job or around it. And, there's the £1,500, I think, as part of the DVP payment for that can cover some training costs. So it'd be good to know, from your perspective, what sort of things DWP is kind of looking for there. But I'm also kind of interested, and a couple of people have asked again in the chat, about how Kickstart joins up with traineeships, where we've got an extra £100 million announced in the July plan for jobs, which we're now getting to the point of starting to procure. So we'll get back to the pace point there, but we'll perhaps pick that up with the DFE, and apprenticeships. So I guess there's a question about the £1,500 for training and what sort of things you're expecting that to cover, or you would like employers to be thinking about, and gateway organisations, but then also more generally the join up between this scheme and traineeships and apprenticeships.
So the kind of the £1,500 for training and startup costs and stuff, that it can depend quite a bit on the sector, really, because it depends. It could be anything as simple as the most basic employability support, like CV writing, networking, health and safety at work is quite a good one, but it can also go into more kind of sectoral skills and training that I was talking to a large engineering firm who wanted to kind of combine it with an element of the apprenticeship scheme and offer a lot of Kickstart young people apprenticeships afterwards. And another London-based coffee industry charity that wanted to kind of give a lot of young people an entry point into quality assurance and the food industry and stuff like that. So it can vary quite a lot, and it will be looked at the application process. And when we eventually release guidance, there'll be an element of what good looks like, as much as we can, because obviously what good looks like for the coffee retailer is going to be very different to an engineering firm. Traineeships and apprenticeships, we've worked very closely with DFE on these, not least because they were worried we were going to take away all the young people. But I think the most important point is that an apprenticeship or a traineeship is better than Kickstart because they are a full-time, long-term job, whereas Kickstart is 6 months and then hopefully you go to a full-time job, but it's not as secure as an apprenticeship or a traineeship. So ideally no one will be on Kickstart who could go into an apprenticeship and traineeship, and the work coaches will refer them that way first.
Okay, that's helpful. I mean, I guess a traineeship isn't that sort of paid job in that sense. It's sort of like pre-employment training, but I guess there's kind of point about, so you mentioned an example of I can't remember which, you give an example of people wanting to do Kickstart jobs and then turn them into apprenticeships at the end, which is fantastic. I guess, are there going to be sort of any incentives from that, or any push from that, or are you going to share sort of employer best practice around some of these things as well?
There will be, to an extent. I don't know what necessarily exact specific incentives there might be, but I think that specific case was a larger employer that needed to attract more young people in the current economic situation anyway. So it can become very bespoke, I guess, is the issue.
Okay, thank you. So let's build on the joining up point. Sam, one of the it's always good to see so many people wanting to do so many things to help young people or people of any age, but we have a tendency in this country to end up with sort of accreting layers of initiatives, and one of the things I worry a little bit about is who's going to find the young people who aren't turning up at a job centre or a college or wherever? And secondly, if you turn up at a job centre, are you going to get offered Kickstart? And if you turn up at a college, you're going to get offered a course. And if you turn up somewhere, I was going to ask you a very leading question, but I'm now going to phrase it differently. No, I'm not. I'm going to ask a leading question. Do we surely not need a more joined up offer that tailors the support a young person gets depending on that individual? And assuming the answer to that is yes, because that's kind of sounds obvious, how do we actually do it, given at the moment the risk is we've got loads of initiatives, all of which might be good on their own but not necessarily together?
Yeah, exactly. Really good point. Good leading question. I can agree with. We as the Youth Employment Group chairs are doing having a lot of conversations across different teams, the careers team in DFE, traineeships team. There's the new DFE NEAT board that's been set up that I presented to yesterday. Obviously DWP, there's a lot of join up that's needed centrally and locally. I think there's different levels to this question and answer. Lots of people are talking about mapping. Mapping seems to be on everybody's mind at the moment. It's mapping for whom, which scheme is appropriate, and for what routes for employers are best for them. So there's definitely two different levels to that, and it's arming and equipping lots of people who are engaging with young people with all of those, so that they can make the right choices. Traineeships is interesting because, of course, they don't just sit in the Job Centre Plus system. Kickstart is only currently in the Job Centre Plus system. So traineeships could really reach some of those young people that aren't going to be reached by Kickstart initially, but the people that are engaging with young people really understand traineeships. That's going to be crucial. So a real push on traineeships and what they can do and their benefits is going to be important. And then if Kickstart does then reach those young people not in job centres, then how do these things all fit together? I think that's crucial. I think of it sort of like a Trivial Pursuit piece. So, all these bits are wedges within, and Kickstart is one of the wedges. Traineeships is another wedge. We're not at full wedge yet. We're not at full Trivial Pursuit. Going to the middle of the board yet. There's a lot more that's needed. But when we are thinking about these things, what are the gaps? How can you map those, particularly for certain groups of young people that are going to be that have always traditionally fallen through the gaps, that they're not pushed further to the back of the queue for all of these schemes. That's really important.
Thanks, Sam. It's nearly Christmas, so it's nearly Trivial. I don't know if we're allowed to play socially distanced Trivial Pursuit. We'll have to find out what the rules are. Who'd have thought that would be a thing?
Could I jump in there?
Yeah, no, please do. Yeah.
So I think we agree, and finding those people who are not walking into a job centre and asking for help is a problem DWP has always, and hopefully will always, but is always going to have to face and try and work around. And I think that is where gateways are can be a major benefit, in that maybe Kickstart ends and we've still got these kind of gateway networks established of people who normally might not come into, or organizations, employers that might not normally get involved in a government policy, and maybe have some bespoke specialities if they're a charity organization, if they're maybe it's a group of smaller retail employers rather than the major chain supermarkets that government might turn to first, rather than the smaller corner shops that might never ever get involved in a Kickstart or any kind of government policy.
I would go even further than that, if I can also jump in and say it's another bit of DWP looking at youth hubs, which is really exciting. Youth hubs looking to go further than young people in the benefits system. There's 2 demonstrator sites being set up around what is a youth hub, how do you reach young people and bring young people into the system that wouldn't normally have been, or just partnering with local partners, local authorities, charities. I think that's a really exciting, in conjunction with talking about traineeships, Kickstart, all these different schemes. How do you bring them together and how do you localize? I think youth hubs is a really exciting potential sort of transformative piece of landscape.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to perhaps suggest that we close off the poll, and if the Learning and Work Institute team would be kind enough to put up the results, then we can kind of maybe pick up in the last 10 minutes that we're coming into now some of the issues that have come through that and some of the results highlighted. So, well, there you go. So this is kind of the thing when you're allowed to pick 2 answers. This is like ask the audience on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I guess they're all pretty close, aren't they? So those first 4 anyway. So I think the sort of making sure we get those people who will benefit most, including those not on UC, that feels to me just critical. And then the quality point is there. I think for me that's let's get onto this in a moment. It's partly about the sort of standards we set, but it's also about the examples that we give. and then the point about an overall youth guarantee or overall offer, and then not far behind the sustainability point, and then the quantity argument actually coming in last. So of course we need some quantity, but it's no good if we haven't got all these other things beforehand. So thank you all for voting on that. I think that's kind of those first four were all quite close, but it actually tells a story that the fifth one was sort of furthest behind, because we need to get the quality correct. So thank you for all your voting on that. I guess whilst we're talking about the sort of overall offer, we've talked about it here as an offer to young people, and I wonder perhaps if we can talk about, it has come through in the Q&A as well, about the offer to employers, which we got onto a little bit there, and in particular, you know, what are we asking employers to do? What's the, you know, is it T-level placements? Is it work placements for schools? Is it sector-based work academies, traineeships, apprenticeships, Kickstart? You know, the list goes on and on and on. John, I wonder from Clarion's perspective, you know, you're an employer, but you're also working with lots of employers. How does the kind of, how do we do that sort of communication with employers and try and make it simple and target it where it's helpful? Is there a role for sharing some case studies or examples of what good placements look like, or whatever those type of placements happen to be? How do we approach the employer conversation?
There is certainly a role for case studies. I mean, I think one of the issues we've got around any government initiative for employers, one of the things that frightens them most is the bureaucracy. And they're being approached by several different organisations. So a case study showing them what can be achieved in their environment is always a good thing. We're quite successful as an organisation in getting people into employment and critically sustaining the employment. So last year we had 3,895 people went into employment through Clarion and its partners. It was in partnership with other housing associations. And we actually had a 92% progression rate, sustainment rate, so really high sustainment rate, and it's all down to working with employers. So we have people that go on the ground, and their role is to work with employers to iron out any issues that might be between the young person and the employer. Sometimes it needs a bit of intervention to sort out an issue. So the sustainability is the issue. Getting people into work is not the main thing. It's actually the first few weeks or few months are imperative, and then on the long-going relationship and how you work with the employer to perhaps move the person to an apprenticeship or to some progression route, and show them that they in fact are contributing to their career. So it's not just putting people into work. It's the support afterwards that makes the difference, and that's what's going to make a difference in Kickstart. I think it's not just working with employers. We know a number of the employers the housing providers are working with. Some of them haven't got any experience in this field, so they'll need guidance. They'll need exchange of good practice to know what they should be doing. There's the will there. It's a case of the way, and I think as a partnership with our, between ourselves and other organisations such as Youth Employment Group and other organisations in the field, Princess Trust and the like, there's plenty of expertise and knowledge out there. It's making sure it's shared properly and people pick up on it. And crucially, I think it's getting feedback from the young people as well. That'll inform the case studies. So as things progress and as things do work, we have some good practices and good results. That's what needs to be circulated. So other organisations that feel in the right space can come on board as well and contribute to this.
Thanks, John. Yeah, and we definitely would have loved. We should probably have spent more time talking about the young people's voice as well. Actually, it's absolutely critical. We don't miss that along on the way, and it informs all that we do. Oliver, we're sort of coming towards the end of the time. I'm not sure if there's a kind of final. We'll, as I say, we'll kind of pick up. There's tons of specific questions which we'll get across to you. But I don't know if there's a kind of final point either about how we engage employers and how DWP is approaching that, or more generally on Kickstart, that you would like to get across.
It's quite a broad thing to quickly sum up, I suppose. But yeah, we have engaged and we continue to engage with over 300 different organisations, and yeah, it's fully in our interest to get this right, and it's in the young person's interest, it's in the employer's interest. I'm very glad this is a policy that everyone seems to agree with. It's just how you best execute it rather than whether or not we should do it. So I guess a final call is just to have a look at the application process, have a look at the information that is out there, and we will only be adding to that and to make it clearer and easier and to help as many young people as possible.
Great, thanks, Oliver. And Sam, I'll give you an almost final word.
Thank you. I would just say, keeping our mind on what is the problem we're trying to solve. This is one part of the problem. We need Kickstart. We need it to get it right. And these next details are going to be really important in doing that. We've all got to work together in making it a good scheme for young people and employers. Oh, you're on mute, Stephen.
I made it right to the end. Right to the end. The team will edit that out for the YouTube video afterwards. Can I say a huge thank you to Oliver and to John and to Sam for speaking today. We really appreciate your time. I'm also just thank you to more than 300 people who dialed in to take part as well, and probably about more than 300 questions and comments on the chat as well as all the votes in the polls. I'm really glad it was kind of sparked some interest and was pretty interactive. So thank you for all of those. As I say, we'll pick out some of those, all of those sort of specific clarification questions and get them across to Oliver, and then try and get those answers out to people. I think if Oliver is going to take one thing at all away, it's please publish that full guidance as quickly as possible. That kind of has rung through.
And get a banner behind me.
Yeah, and a banner behind you as well. Yeah, guidance first though, I'd say, but yeah, banner as well. We'll all work on that. And I think also what's sprung through is the point about these things work locally, and they work where they're joined up and where you've got experience, where you've got examples. So I think there's probably something for all of us, and we at the Learning and Work Institute are really happy and keen to play our role in this, in understanding what good looks like and what the experience looks like and how we share all of that. So thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to the Learning and Work Institute team for running all of this and making sure it worked. And thank you to more than 300 people who took part, and we had a good lively discussion in the Q&A as well. We want to continue that, so please do get in touch if there's anything that we can support with or anything we can work together on. And in the meantime, good luck to everybody with making a success of Kickstart, because it really matters for young people's futures. Thank you.